Tonight, get cozy, because Sacha and his magical globe atlas are taking you on a brand new, extraordinary adventure. The rain would not stop. Since the morning, it had fallen without pause, as if the sky had decided to empty all its tears in a single day. It slid down the window panes of Sacha's room in silvery streams, drawing fleeting rivers that merged at the edges of the glass. The steady drumming of the drops echoed like a monotonous music, filling the room with a calm yet slightly sorrowful atmosphere. The sky, heavy and gray, covered the world in a dull veil, and everything seemed frozen. Sacha, 5 years old, lay stretched out on the carpet of his bedroom. Around him was scattered a colorful mess of his favorite books, tales of glittering dragons, comic books filled with heroes in bright costumes, and even joke collections he already knew by heart. He had read them all, again and again. Nothing could soothe the boredom that crept in slowly, like an invisible fog. The boy sighed deeply. His imagination, so lively and restless, demanded more than illustrated pages. He longed for dazzling sunlight, faraway lands, and grand adventures that would make his heart race. But in this rain-dimmed room, his dreams felt trapped, like birds behind glass. His gaze wandered around the room until it stopped on a peculiar object, an old globe resting on a shelf. But this was no ordinary globe. It was Atlas, Sacha's most treasured possession. Atlas had been a gift from his grandfather on his last birthday. But it was not just a decorative object. His grandfather had confided that the globe possessed an ancient magic and that it would always be his most faithful friend. Its bronze-colored shell sometimes seemed to glow even in the shadows, and the continents, dusted with golden sand, shimmered as though they held secrets unseen by adults. Intrigued by a glow that seemed brighter than usual that day, Sacha approached and took Atlas in his hands. The globe was warm, almost alive, as if it had been waiting for this very moment. He sat on the edge of his bed and opened a large history book about ancient Egypt. His fingers flipped eagerly through the pages until they stopped on an illustration of the pyramids of Giza. Those stone mountains, standing proudly in the middle of an endless desert, seemed to belong to another world. Fascinated, Sacha imagined himself standing before them. How, thousands of years ago, had humans managed to build such wonders without modern machines? Was it sheer strength, clever ingenuity, or a secret that time had hidden away? The mystery was so powerful that he felt drawn into the image, as though the pyramids themselves were calling to him. Clutching Atlas tightly against his chest, he silently formed his wish to discover the secret of their construction. At that very instant, a soft light burst forth from the globe. It was neither blinding nor cold. It was a golden glow, warm and gentle, filling the room with a comforting aura. The walls began to dissolve, like a veil of mist swept away by the wind. The carpet, the bed, the shelves, all faded, replaced by a strange heat that wrapped itself around Sacha. His body felt as though it were floating, lighter than a feather. His eyes closed of their own accord, soothed by a sensation of softness, as if he were resting on an invisible cloud. When he opened them again, everything had changed. The rain was gone, the gray sky too. In their place stretched a blazing light, the scorching sun hanging in a vast blue sky. The air was dry and hot, every breath filling his lungs with an unfamiliar warmth. Before him stretched an ocean of golden sand, rolling away endlessly in majestic dunes. Each grain sparkled like a speck of gold. And there, on the horizon, stood the pyramids, larger, more imposing than he had ever imagined, eternal, immovable guardians of ancient knowledge. Sacha's heart raced with excitement. There was no longer any doubt. He was in Egypt. Atlas had kept its promise. Overwhelmed with wonder, he hugged the globe to his chest and began walking across the hot sand. His backpack, light on his shoulders, carried his sketchbook and pencils, always ready to capture whatever he might discover. Suddenly, a sound reached his ears, a faint tinkling, like the chime of a small bell. Curious, Sacha stopped. The sound was accompanied by the slow, steady steps of an animal crossing the desert. A figure appeared in the distance. A man dressed in light-colored robes, his head wrapped in a turban, leading a tall dromedary by its bridle. The man approached slowly. His face was marked by the sun, yet softened by a kind, welcoming smile. His eyes held a quiet wisdom, as though they already knew the secrets of the desert. Sacha realized then that he was not alone. The desert, vast though it was, had sent him a guide. This man, a camel driver named Kamal, seemed to have been waiting for him. In his steady movements and his thoughtful gaze, Sacha sensed a certainty. Kamal knew why the boy had come. The camel driver greeted him with warmth and silently listened, as though he could. The sun was slowly sinking lower in the sky, yet the heat of the desert still burned with intensity. Beneath Sacha's feet, the sand felt like glowing embers, and each dune seemed larger than the last. Yet the boy was not discouraged. Echoing in his heart were the silent words of Kamal, the camel driver. The answer to the mystery of the pyramids would not be found merely within their ancient stones, but somewhere further on, guided by a playful creature. This thought filled Sacha with excitement. The desert, which at first had seemed empty and intimidating, now appeared to him as a vast open book, each step writing a new sentence. The wind carried the dry scent of heated sand, and the shifting contours of the dunes seemed to change constantly, as if the landscape itself was playing tricks on him. He walked steadily, holding Atlas close. The globe said nothing, but it radiated a gentle warmth, as though reminding him that he was never truly alone. Then a sudden movement caught his eye. Perched on a half-buried rock was a tiny figure, blending almost perfectly with the golden sand. It was a small desert creature, but its enormous ears gave it away. A fennec fox, its dark, glistening eyes sparkled with curiosity. The animal stood still for a moment, then leapt lightly behind another rock. Seconds later, it reappeared farther away, head tilted playfully, as if beckoning him to follow. In that instant, Sacha understood. the mischievous guide Kamal had spoken of was not a person at all, but this little fox of the desert. His heart racing, Sacha quickened his pace. The fennec darted ahead, always just beyond reach, vanishing and reappearing with each dune, as though leading him deeper into the sands. Its graceful leaps left barely a trace behind. Each time Sacha feared he had lost it, the fox would appear again, its sharp eyes gleaming with mischief. The boy sometimes struggled to keep up. The sand slipped beneath his feet. His legs grew heavy, and the sun still beat down fiercely on his back. But the presence of the fennec, both playful and reassuring, pushed him forward. He felt certain that this creature knew a path he could not yet see. The desert stretched endlessly, yet it was not lifeless. As he walked, Sacha noticed details he had missed before. A tiny plant clinging stubbornly to life between two rocks, the delicate trail of a beetle etching patterns in the sand, the fleeting shadow of a bird soaring high above. Even in this harsh, scorching place, life found a way to endure. But suddenly, the desert revealed its true power. On the horizon, a strange haze rose into the air. It was not mist, but a shimmering veil of sand torn from the ground by the wind. The fennec, which had been leaping joyfully moments before, froze and lifted its head. Its large ears twitched. Then, without a sound, it vanished into the hollow of a dune. The wind picked up, at first gently, then with frightening force. Sacha felt the grains of sand lash against his legs. The sky darkened, as though a massive shadow had been cast over the desert. A sandstorm was coming. He clutched Atlas tightly, eyes darting around in panic. The storm struck with sudden violence. The wind roared, lifting entire clouds of golden dust and flinging them across the sky. Sand whipped into his hair, stung his skin, and forced its way into his clothes. Breathing became difficult. The world around him had transformed into a swirling, blinding storm. Terror gripped Sacha's chest. He could hardly see, his eyes filled with grit, his throat dry. But then, through the golden chaos, he spotted a dark shape, a boulder half buried in the sand. Gathering what strength he had, he stumbled toward it and crouched behind, seeking shelter. Huddled against the rock, he tucked Atlas safely into his bag. The globe pulsed with a faint warmth, as though radiating calm. Slowly, Sacha began to understand. The desert had its rules, and the only way to survive was to listen to them. All he could do was wait. The storm raged on, perhaps for minutes, perhaps for hours. In the midst of that golden chaos, time seemed meaningless. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the fury subsided. The wind fell silent. The sand settled gently back to the ground. Like a golden rain, the sky cleared, and stillness returned. When Sacha dared to open his eyes, he was struck by the breathtaking sight before him. The desert, scoured clean by the storm, appeared brighter, purer than ever. The air was startlingly clear, each dune sharp against the horizon. The silence that followed was so deep, it felt almost sacred. And there, atop a nearby dune, stood the fennec. Its slim figure was outlined by the golden glow of the sunset. Its eyes shone with playful mischief, as if laughing softly at the ordeal the desert had set before him. Then, with a flick of its tail, the fox bounded away again, heading toward the horizon. Sacha rose to his feet. His legs still trembled, but inside, something had changed. He had faced the desert's fury and endured. He felt stronger now, more resilient. The storm had taught him patience, endurance, and the importance of calm in the face of fear. With renewed determination, he followed his guide once more. His steps felt steadier, his resolve firmer. The desert no longer frightened him as it had before. After what felt like endless walking, just as the sun dipped lower, a strange sight appeared in the distance. A line of green, faint but unmistakable, stretched across the horizon. Sacha's heart leapt against the golden expanse of the desert. The green seemed almost magical. The fennec bounded excitedly toward it, ears bobbing like wings. Sacha quickened his pace, hope filling his chest. The air began to change. It was cooler now, fresher, carrying the subtle scent of vegetation. At last, climbing one final dune, he beheld it, an oasis. Tall palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, their fronds rustling like whispers. At the center lay a pool of clear, sparkling water, reflecting the fading light of the sun. Around it grew grasses and flowers, small but vibrant, a sanctuary of life in the midst of vast emptiness. Joy surged through Sacha. He had found the oasis of the blue serpent. The fennec padded gracefully toward the heart of the oasis and stopped before a large carved stone. Unlike the other rocks, its surface was dark and polished, etched with strange symbols, birds, waves, and stylized suns. Sacha approached slowly, captivated. He realized this was no ordinary stone. It was a marker, perhaps even a doorway to the truth he was seeking. And as he stood there, gazing at the glowing horizon, he knew his journey was far from over. The real adventure was only just beginning. The desert, which only hours before had seemed hostile and endless, now opened before Sacha like a vast book of mysteries. The sudden appearance of the oasis was nothing short of a miracle. After the sandstorm, after the heat and exhaustion, this patch of green shimmered like a promise of life. The air was cooler, softer. It felt as though the desert, having tested its traveler, was now offering him a reward. Sacha descended the dune with a mix of impatience and caution. His feet sank slightly into the sand, but already he felt a difference beneath his steps. The ground was less arid, dotted with small stones and roots. The fragrance of palm trees and fresh water floated in the air. It was no longer the dry, burning scent of the desert, but something vibrant, an intoxicating blend of vegetation and moisture. Before him, the oasis stretched like a jewel of green, set in the golden sea of dunes. Tall palm trees stood proudly, their slender trunks rising high, their fronds swaying gently in the evening breeze. At the center, a pool of clear water sparkled, catching the last light of the setting sun. Around its edges, small flowers bloomed from the damp sand. and the faint song of birds echoed, tiny voices drawn to this sanctuary of life. The fennec, ever his faithful guide, was already by the water's edge. Its large ears twitched, listening to every sound, and its black eyes glimmered in the orange glow. It watched Sacha for a moment, as though ensuring the boy had found the strength to make it here. Then, with a graceful trot, it padded toward a dark stone near the pool and sat before it. Sacha followed. The stone was unlike the others scattered around the oasis. Its surface was smooth, polished, almost as if carved by human hands. Strange symbols were etched across its face, gleaming faintly in the light. Stylized birds, waves, suns, and interwoven lines. It was writing, an ancient language long forgotten. Fascinated, Sacha placed his hand upon the stone. It was warm, as though it still held the sun's heat, but beneath that warmth he sensed something more, a subtle vibration, almost alive. Atlas, tucked into his bag, seemed to hum in response, a gentle pulse echoing the strange engravings. Sacha closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind still echoed the question that had led him here. How were the pyramids built? Images from his history book flickered before him. Men in simple tunics hauling massive blocks, rows of ropes and wooden rollers, rough sketches of ramps and levers. But he felt the answer was greater than those simple illustrations. He let his fingers trace the carvings. As he followed the shapes, he sensed they were telling a story, a sun, then a wave, then a bird. Each symbol whispered a silent word, as though the stone itself spoke directly to his imagination. The fennec began to hop excitedly around him, as though it too knew something important was happening. Sacha's heart pounded. Slowly, the engravings glowed, faintly at first, then brighter, until the stone shimmered with inner light. And then a crack appeared. The stone split open, just enough to reveal a soft blue glow. Inside, hidden for centuries, lay a rolled parchment, carefully preserved. With trembling hands, Sacha reached for it. The parchment was old, its surface cracked and fragile. A scent rose from it, the scent of ancient books mixed with earth and sand. Slowly, he unrolled it, and his eyes widened. Drawn across the parchment were figures, lines and symbols that formed a story. They depicted men and women, artisans, architects, laborers, all working together in a vast effort. There were ropes, sledges, ramps built of sand, and crude levers. Faces were shown too, worn with fatigue, yet filled with determination. And then, in the silence of the oasis, a voice seemed to rise, not spoken aloud, but carried within him, as though Atlas himself was sharing the meaning. The message was clear. The pyramids had not been built by magic, but through human ingenuity, cooperation, and perseverance. Thousands of people had labored together, uniting their strength and skills. Architects designed the plans, craftsmen shaped the stones, workers transported them with courage and patience. Each block was more than stone. It was the living proof of collaboration and endurance. Sacha stood still, overwhelmed by the revelation. At last, he understood. The greatness of the pyramids was not only in their size or mystery, but in the human story they carried. They were monuments to what people could achieve when they worked together with determination. The parchment glowed softly in his hands. At the bottom, words appeared, etched in light itself. Every stone has a story, and every story has its stone. The sentence struck Sacha with the force of truth. He lifted his gaze toward the horizon, where the pyramids still rose against the crimson sky. Each block he saw was no longer a lifeless shape, but a fragment of memory, a silent story carved into time. Around him, the oasis seemed to breathe with new life. The wind through the palms whispered in agreement, carrying the lesson into the air. The fennec, seated by the pool, watched quietly, its dark eyes serene. Sacha carefully placed the parchment in his bag. He knew he could not keep it just for himself. He would have to share it, to tell others what he had learned. Knowledge was only valuable when passed on. Above, the sky deepened into violet and indigo. The first stars emerged, twinkling shyly against the vast night. Sacha tilted his head back. They seemed to smile down at his journey, silent guides scattered across the heavens. He felt tired, but it was not the weariness of defeat. It was a gentle fatigue, the kind that follows a test overcome and a truth revealed. His heart, however, was filled with joy and a newfound certainty. The world held countless secrets, and each adventure would teach him another lesson. The fennec stretched, then slipped silently into the tall grasses of the oasis. Its task was complete. Sacha understood that other guides would appear on his path, other signs waiting to be discovered. For now, he hugged Atlas close. The globe glowed faintly, like a lantern in the night. And in the vast silence of the desert, beneath the starlit sky, Sacha knew that his journey had only just begun. Night had fallen over the oasis. The last glimmers of the sun had slipped away behind the dunes, leaving an immense sky strewn with stars. The palm trees stood like dark silhouettes against the horizon, and the water in the pool shimmered under the silver glow of the moon. After the revelation of the parchment, everything seemed transformed. The air was cooler, softer, carrying with it a sense of serenity. The desert, which only hours earlier had revealed its harshness, now felt protective, almost benevolent. Sacha sat by the pool. The parchment, carefully rolled and tucked into his bag, still seemed to vibrate, as though the message it carried was alive. He pressed his hands into the damp sand, feeling its coolness slide between his fingers. For the first time since arriving in Egypt, he wasn't wondering what lay ahead. He simply allowed himself to be immersed in the peace of the moment. The fennec lay nearby, watching with calm eyes. Its large ears twitched from time to time at the whisper of the wind. The mischievous little guide had led Sacha across the desert, bringing him here to uncover the truth. Its task was complete, and yet it lingered for a while longer, as though ensuring the boy had truly grasped the meaning of the lesson. Sacha lifted his gaze toward the stars. Never had he seen so many, nor so bright. They seemed like an endless glittering carpet, a celestial pathway stretching above. He realized these same stars had guided desert travelers for centuries, silent companions of wanderers and builders alike. The pyramids, too, owed part of their existence to the heavens, for without the stars, men would never have known their way across the vast sands. A thought settled in his mind. Every element of the desert, no matter how small, played its part in the story. The sand, the wind, the scarce water, the stars, and the people with their courage and perseverance. The pyramid was not only a human achievement, but the result of an alliance between man and nature, between intelligence and patience. The fennec rose gracefully to its feet and, with a final nimble leap, vanished among the palms and tall grass. Sacha watched it disappear without sadness. He understood now that some guides only walked with you for a part of the journey. And then it was up to you to continue on your own. He remained at the oasis a little longer, savoring its stillness. Then he felt a familiar warmth radiating from Atlas. The globe glowed softly, its golden light calm and reassuring. Sacha knew it was time to return. The desert had given him an answer, not the one he had expected, but something far more precious. Clutching Atlas against his chest, he closed his eyes. At once, the strange sensation of floating returned, as though his body was carried by an invisible breeze. The sand, the palms, the water, all dissolved into a golden mist. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in his bedroom. The rain had stopped. Through the window stretched a sky washed clean, and arching high above his house was a radiant rainbow. Its vivid colors seemed to dance in the air, like a signature left by the desert to prove that the adventure had been real. Around him, everything looked ordinary once more. The carpet, the piles of books, the scattered pencils. Yet Sacha knew that nothing would ever be the same again. He opened his bag and pulled out his sketchbook. As he flipped it open, fine grains of sand slipped from between the pages, sparkling in the daylight. They were proof, small but undeniable, that his journey had not been a dream. With his pencil, he began to draw. He sketched the graceful silhouette of the fennec, the towering pyramids against the sky, Kamal, the camel driver, and the oasis with its mysterious carved stone. Each stroke brought the memories back to life. As he drew, a conviction grew within him. This adventure could not remain a secret. He would share it, first with his parents, then perhaps with others. The parchment had taught him that knowledge only found its true value when passed on. To keep it hidden would be like burying a flame beneath the sand. That evening at the dinner table, he recounted everything he had seen and learned. His words tumbled out with excitement, his eyes still glowing with the brilliance of the desert. Perhaps his parents believed it was only the product of a child's imagination. Perhaps they thought he had simply dreamed it all. But Sacha knew with absolute certainty that every detail was true. Later, as he prepared for bed, he placed Atlas carefully on his bedside table. The globe glowed faintly in the darkness, like a comforting lantern. Sacha understood that this was only the beginning of a long journey. The world was full of mysteries, and Atlas still held many secrets to reveal. He drifted to sleep with a smile on his lips, his pencils close at hand, ready to capture the next adventure in his sketchbook. And in the quiet of his room, a single truth echoed softly. Every stone has a story, and every story has its stone. The desert had transformed him, and from that moment on, every day of his life would be an adventure of its own. Every journey is a story, and every story calls for a new adventure. Where will the next one take them? Join Sacha and Atlas very soon in a new adventure to discover the world.